Vivian, your brother spent the last hour at your mother's kitchen table telling her that $40,000 is gone. The bank can only confirm $23,000 of it on a same-day call. But he said the rest was moved somewhere she won't find it easily. And he told her the only person with access to that account besides him was you, Consuelo said. And I heard the kitchen faucet running in the background of her call, which meant she had already rinsed her lunch plate and was thinking about how she needed to tell me this before the afternoon shifted into something she could no longer carry alone. Consuelo Reyes does not make panic calls. She makes calls when she has decided something needs to be named out loud. And by then, she has already picked the exact words. The one detail that would stay with me later. My mother had not called me herself. Theo had gotten there first. In this family, the person who speaks first does not just speak first. They write the only version the others will remember, and everyone else spends the rest of their life trying to correct a record with facts the family has already decided not to believe. I was at my desk at Meridian Health Partners on the 12th floor of a building on Bel Air that smells like floor wax, and the coffee shop in the lobby. My second monitor held a spreadsheet. Quarterly budget reconciliation. Locked, because I was still trying to solve a variance of $4,200 in the travel category that the system had flagged 3 days earlier. The cell was highlighted in red. I had been staring at it for 20 minutes, trying to track down whether it was a timing issue or an actual missing receipt, when Consuelo's name appeared on my phone screen. I did not interrupt her as she spoke. I closed the spreadsheet. What I understood in that moment, sitting in my chair with the office moving around me, the sound of the mailroom 2 floors down sorting claims, Michelle Chen 3 doors away talking to a client about coverage denials, the usual Tuesday afternoon rhythm, was that my brother had beaten me to the phone. He had driven 8 miles from his apartment to my mother's kitchen table and told her a story before I even knew there was a story to tell. Before my mother had even called me. Before anyone had asked me a single question. "Is Mom on the phone with you?" asked. "No," Consuelo said. "She asked me to call. She said she didn't know what to say." My mother, who had taught high school English for 37 years, who could deliver a lecture on the structure of a well-formed argument without consulting a single note, had decided that she could not form her own words. That was the real number I needed to understand, not the $40,000. That, "Thank you for calling," I said, which was true. And also was the kind of thing I say when I'm buying myself time to think, when I'm still figuring out what I have just been told and what it means if it is true. "Vivian, I didn't believe him," Consuelo said. She needed me to know that. I appreciated it. I also understood that her not believing him and her calling me instead of confronting him herself were 2 separate things. And both of them would matter later. When we hung up, I sat at my desk and pulled up the bank portal on my phone. I had access to an overview of my mother's accounts. She had added me as an authorized user 3 years ago after her hip surgery, when she was in physical therapy and needed someone to monitor the household expenses while she recovered. The quarterly statement would not be available until the 8th of the next month. But the running balance was visible, a high $47,200. That was $4,000 lower than what the balance had been when I checked it 2 weeks earlier. I opened the family group chat. There were 17 unread messages. The most recent one was from Theo, time-stamped 42 minutes ago. Family, I need to tell everyone what's happening with Mum's account. And I'm doing it here so there's no misunderstanding. There are suspicious transfers. Some going back to February, some in March, some in May. I can only confirm that 23,000 has moved, but the bank said there's more. I don't want to point fingers, but the only other person with access is Vivian. I think we need to talk about what's happening. I read it 3 times. What I noticed first was the specificity. Not a vague accusation. My brother had given the family a timeline. February, March, May, $800 to $2,400 per transaction, 16 total transfers. He had handed them a narrative so precise that if they questioned it, they would have to accuse him of fabricating details, rather than simply asking him where he was getting his information. He had made it expensive to doubt him. He had made it expensive to ask him a single follow-up question. The second message was from Uncle Raymond. Vivian, what's going on? The third was from my cousin Portia. I'm going to call Mom. The fourth was from my other cousin, Emeka. This doesn't sound right. My mother had not responded. Not one message. She had read all 17 messages. The chat showed her timestamp, and had decided to let her children and her church friend and her own brother write the story without her. I closed the chat and opened my banking app again. The overview showed only movement. To see the actual statement, I would need to request it. I called the number on the back of the card and waited. When someone picked up, I gave them my mother's account number and my name. Ms. Kafar, I show you as an authorized user, the agent said. How can I help? I need a detailed statement for the last 14 months. Everything. That won't be available immediately. The most recent completed statement is from last month. I can email that to you right now, and you'll have access to the fuller history through the online portal within 48 hours. Send it now, I said. While I waited for the email, I did something I had told myself I would not do for at least another hour. I called my mother. She picked up on the fourth ring, which meant she had looked at the screen and decided whether she wanted to answer before she did. Viv? Her voice was careful. That was not the voice she used when I called on Sundays. That was the voice she used with strangers at the grocery store when she had to ask someone to move their cart. Mom, I got the message, I said. I didn't do it. I know you didn't, she said, and then she stopped. I waited for the rest of it. In my family, I know you didn't is often followed by but we need to figure out what happened. But we need to be careful about what we say. But your brother is in a difficult place right now, but maybe there's an explanation. The but is where the real sentence lives. It did not come. I just need to understand what happened, she said instead. I can help you figure that out, I told her. I'm going to pull the statements and we'll go through them together. Okay, she said. Thank you. When we hung up, I sat at my desk and did not move for approximately 4 minutes. I was still in the same chair, at the same desk, with the same variants highlighted in red on my secondary monitor. I had not changed positions. I had not called anyone else. The office around me had not changed. But the conversation I had just had with my mother had made it clear that something fundamental had shifted. She believed me when I said I did not do it. She also did not believe me enough to defend me. She believed that I was innocent and that she needed to hear my explanation, which meant she had decided it was possible that I was guilty until I proved otherwise. I opened the secondary email account I use for personal finances. The statement had arrived. I downloaded it, saved it to a folder on my desktop, and opened it. 34 transactions over 14 months. The amounts ranged from $800 to $2,400. Most of them in cash. The dates were exactly what my brother had recited to the family. February through the following May, with a concentration in March and April. He had described the pattern to the family with the precision of someone who knew it because he had memorized it, not because he had discovered it. I was a financial analyst because I noticed things. I noticed when quarterly travel variances did not match the receipt stack. I noticed when the same vendor submitted 2 invoices for the same service. I noticed when the numbers told a story and the narrative told a different version of it. I noticed when people were lying, not because they were bad liars, but because they were precise liars. The kind of people who practice a story so many times that they forget that precision itself is a form of evidence. Precision is not how an honest person describes something they discovered by accident. Precision is how someone describes something they have rehearsed. My brother had given me everything I needed to understand what had happened. He just thought that I would be too busy defending myself to use it. I looked at the variant still highlighted in red on my screen. $4,200 in missing documentation. A timing issue, most likely. Something the accounting department would probably resolve on their own by month end. It was small enough that I could close out the reconciliation and come back to it. I marked it as pending documentation and locked the spreadsheet. Then I opened my calendar for the next week. I had a dentist appointment on Wednesday. A status meeting on Thursday with the director. Between the two, I would have the morning free. That was when I would start pulling records. Not because I was panicking. Not because I needed to prove anything. But because the people who win these kinds of arguments are the ones who build their case before they start fighting. They are the ones who know what questions to ask before anyone asks them. I did not respond in the family group chat. I did not defend myself. I did not explain. I did not ask Theo what he was doing, or how he thought he was going to get away with this, or what he had done with the money. I took a screenshot of his message, word for word, timestamp and all, and filed it in a folder where I could find it again. The last thing I did before I left the office was forward Consuelo's call to my voicemail and listen to the whole thing again. I transcribed it line by line into a document, noting the timestamp and the background noise, the faucet running, her breathing, the exact moment she paused before she said, I didn't believe him. I did not know yet why I needed all of that. I just knew that Shio had written the first version of the story, and he had been careful about every word. If I was going to rewrite it, I was going to be more careful. I walked out of the office at 5:47 p.m. The elevator down took 45 seconds. The drive home took 23 minutes. I did not call anyone. I did not cry. I did not stop at the grocery store or text a friend or do any of the things a normal person does after their mother has been accused of being a thief by her own family. I drove home. I opened my laptop. I opened the bank statement. I started making a list of every number, every date, every detail my brother had given the family, and I began the work of proving what he had done. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel to give us more motivation to develop it. Thank you very much. Also, please comment where you're watching our videos. New York or Texas? We're very curious. My mother's hip surgery was supposed to be routine. That was the word the orthopedist used. Routine. Grade 2 labral tear. Physical therapy. 6 weeks of careful movement. I cleared my schedule at Meridian to be there for the first 2 weeks of her recovery, taking time off that I had been banking for 3 years. I drove the 47 miles to Houston every morning at 6 and did not tell her how tired I was because she did not ask, and I did not want to be the kind of daughter who made her own sacrifice visible. That was how I had been raised. You help. You do not announce that you are helping. You certainly do not expect credit for it. My brother Theo did not clear his schedule. Theo, who was 38, and running an independent sales consulting business that seemed to fluctuate wildly between promising and on the verge of collapse, called my mother on the Tuesday after her surgery and told her he would handle the financial side of things while she recovered. I'll manage the bills, pay the utilities, run the account, he said to her. I heard him say it when I was helping her to the bathroom. One hand under her elbow, her weight shifting onto me as she moved. You just focus on getting better. Let me take this. My mother, who had managed a household budget for 40 years, who had raised 2 children on a teacher's pension and a civil engineer's steady income, who owned her home outright after 31 years of mortgage payments, said yes. This was the moment the trap opened. Not because Theo intended it then. I do not think he did. Not yet. But because he wanted something from her in that moment. He wanted to be the good son, the one who stepped up, the one who was there when it mattered. He wanted the story he told himself about himself to be true. And my mother, in pain and immobilized and suddenly dependent on her children for the first time in her adult life, handed him the keys because accepting help is a form of vulnerability. And vulnerability is how you teach the people around you that you trust them. Why, it is also how you teach them that they can... I should have said something. I knew I should have said something, but I was so focused on being present for her physical recovery that I did not push back on something that looked, on the surface, like generosity. He was offering to help. She needed help. The math seemed obvious. It took me 3 years to understand that the math was exactly backward. That when someone offers to handle your finances, the appropriate response is not gratitude, but a very careful question. Why? Theo came to the house on Saturdays. He would sit at my mother's kitchen table with her checkbook and her bank statements and her bills arranged in neat stacks. He would ask her questions in a low voice, the way people do in hospital rooms, and she would give him the information he needed. I would be upstairs changing her wound dressing or folding laundry or standing in the doorway of her bedroom watching her sleep. And I would hear the murmur of their voices underneath me like an underground river I was not supposed to interrupt. By the end of week 3, he was an authorized user on her account. Not a co-signer, technically. That would have required her signature on a bank form and a trip to the branch. But functionally, for practical purposes, effectively a cosigner. He could withdraw, he could transfer, he could move money. He had access to every dollar she had earned over 37 years of teaching, every pension deposit, every social security check. "You're sure you want to do this?" I asked him one Saturday while my mother was in the bathroom. We were standing in her kitchen. Granite counters, stainless steel appliances, the refrigerator humming its steady low note. Theo was wearing a blazer, even though it was a Saturday in July in Houston, which meant he had come from somewhere else, somewhere he wanted to look presentable. That detail would stay with me. "It makes sense," he said. "She shouldn't have to worry about any of this while she's healing." He was not wrong. The logic was sound. I just did not believe his commitment to it would hold after my mother was back on her feet. It did not by week 6, when she was cleared to drive again. Theo had stopped coming to help with the bills. He had stopped asking her questions. He had stopped offering. The account stayed open. His name stayed on it. My mother moved back into her routine and seemed to forget that he had ever been there. And I did not remind her because I thought the access would fade naturally. That he would stop using it once the emergency passed. No, I thought people were decent that way. That they took what they needed when the moment required it and released it when they did not. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. The IOU came 6 months later, in January. Theo called my mother and said he needed to borrow $3,000. "Just temporary," he explained. A client deal had fallen through. A commission he was expecting had not materialized. He needed a bridge loan until the Henderson deal closed. He would pay her back within 2 months. Could she help him? My mother said yes, without hesitation. I found out about it on a Saturday when I was at her house for dinner. I was standing at her kitchen sink rinsing dishes while she sat at the table behind me. And she mentioned it the way she mentioned weather. Factual. Uncomplicated. Theo borrowed $3,000 last week. He said the Henderson deal will close by March. I turned around. I dried my hands. I said, "Did he sign anything?" "Oh, he's going to write me an IOU," my mother said, just to be proper about it. He did write it. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, Theo came to the kitchen table with a piece of paper and a pen. My mother was there. I was there. He sat down, uncapped the pen with the kind of theatrical confidence he had been using to sign permission slips since middle school, and he wrote out the words in his own handwriting. "I owe Grace Okafor $3,000, due by March 31st. Theo." He did not date it. He did not write the year. He just signed it and pushed it across the table. My mother picked it up and looked at it. She did not read the words. She looked at his signature, at the fact that he had written it at all. That was what mattered to her, that he had made a gesture toward propriety. The gesture was the important part. The actual promise was secondary. "This is good," she said, and she folded it in half. She stood up, walked to the kitchen drawer, the one where she keeps her utility bills and her property tax statements, and the instruction manuals for appliances she no longer uses. And she filed the IOU in there with everything else. No envelope, no separate folder, just placed it in the drawer, like it was a bill she would pay when it came due. "Theo always comes through," she said. Not to him, not to me, just to the general space of the kitchen. A statement of faith, a statement of the way she wanted the world to work. I did not say anything. I was still learning not to say anything, still practicing the role of the daughter who does not question, who does not worry aloud, who just accepts the way her brother is treated and the way her mother chooses to see him. It was the role I had been trained for my entire life. So I said nothing. March came. The Henderson deal did not close. Theo did not mention the $3,000. My mother did not ask about it. The IOU stayed in the drawer. With the utility bills, I did not go looking for it. I did not confirm that it was still there. I just knew. With the kind of knowledge that lives in the body before the brain catches up. That my mother would not force the issue, that she would tell herself a story about why the deal was delayed, that she would extend the deadline in her own mind and then extend it again. That she would decide eventually that the money was a gift, even though she had written it down as a loan, even though he had signed it. This is how people who love you teach you to accept being lied to. Not through dramatic betrayal. Through 1,000 small decisions to believe the better story, to assume good faith, to give one more chance, to file the IOU in a drawer instead of in your memory where it belongs. The shared location app came after this, in January of the next year. My mother missed her exit on I-10 on her way to church. She was driving in the rain. Her attention split between the road and a voice message from a former student. And she took the wrong ramp. She called me in a panic. She was lost. She did not know where she was. I talked her through it, got her turned around, found her a parking lot to pull into until she calmed down. She was 70 years old, and she had been driving independently for 50 years. And one rain-blurred exit had rattled her enough to call her daughter and say, "I'm scared." That was the vulnerability that changed everything. That moment of fear was the moment she became available to be protected, or to be sold protection under the guise of family concern. I suggested the app that evening. I had one on my phone already. Part of a family plan through Meridian's employee benefits. It was a simple thing. Location sharing, automatic check-ins, the ability to see where your parents were if you got worried. I positioned it as practical, sensible, something that would give her peace of mind and give me one less thing to worry about on nights when I knew she was driving home late from church or visiting friends in neighborhoods I had never been to. "I can see that you made it home safely," I told her. "You won't have to call me anymore. I'll just know." She did not hesitate. She let me install it on her phone that weekend. I installed it on mine too, so we could see each other. I also installed it on Theo's phone. He was at the house, helping her with something, and I asked for his phone, and I added him to the family group. "Just in case," I said, "so we all know where Mom is." He did not question it. Why would he? It was a gift. It was a tool that made him look good, a way to demonstrate concern without doing anything that cost him. It was perfect for what he needed it to be. And I planted the seed that would grow into the evidence that would eventually prove what he did. I did this with the best intentions. I did this out of love and worry and a daughter's careful attention to her mother's safety. I did this by trying to protect her. I did this by giving him a gift that would record his location every single time he opened his phone near an ATM on Westheimer Road. time-stamped and geotagged, and automatically saved to a server where I would find it 3 years later with my hands shaking. I did not know I was doing any of this. I just thought I was being a good daughter. I just thought I was being the one who paid attention, who worried, who noticed when things were not quite right. I thought that reliability was the same thing as loyalty. I thought that if I noticed everything, I could prevent anything. I thought that the people I loved would match the care I gave them with care of their own. I was still very young in some ways, even at 34 years old. I did not yet understand that the most dangerous people are not the ones who take what they want. They are the ones who let you give it to them, who let you install the tools of your own certainty, who let you build the case against them because they never believed you would use it. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel to give us more motivation to develop it. Thank you very much. Also, please comment where you're watching our videos. New York or Texas? We're very curious. When I hung up with Consuelo, I sat in my car for 9 minutes before I turned the key in the ignition. The parking lot at Meridian was mostly empty by then. It was past 6, and the evening sun was doing that thing it does in Texas, where it makes everything look like it's burning from the inside out. I had the phone in my lap. I had not called anyone. I had not texted. I had not done the thing that made sense, which would be to immediately call my mother and ask her what was happening, what Theo had told her, whether she believed him. Instead, I sat very still and thought about the specificity of what Consuelo had said. Theo had spent an hour at the kitchen table. He had named figures. He had described months. He had constructed a narrative so detailed that my mother had not been able to form her own response to it. I drove home. I let myself into my apartment, a one-bedroom in a building that smells like someone else's cooking and the air conditioning system struggling against the Houston heat. And I opened my laptop. I had nothing to look at yet. There was no evidence in front of me except Consuelo's words and the running balance on my mother's account that showed $4,000 lower than it had been 14 days ago. But I knew that the evidence would arrive in the form of a family group chat, because that is how we did things in my family. We did not have difficult conversations in private. We performed them in front of an audience, with witnesses, with a record. My mother had created the group chat 5 years earlier. 6 people, including herself. Grace, Theo, Uncle Raymond, Consuelo Reyes, my cousin Portia, my cousin Emeka, a curated family, a controlled space. The first message came at 8:14. Theo's message. I was making dinner when it arrived. A stir-fry with chicken and broccoli and ginger. And I heard the notification sound, and I did not look at it immediately. I finished browning the chicken. I let it rest. I poured water into a pot for rice. Then I opened the chat. Family, I need to be direct about something that's been weighing on me. Mom called me this morning and told me that money has gone missing from her account. I've been helping her track the transactions, and what we're seeing is concerning. There have been withdrawals starting in February, some in March, some in May, cash withdrawals, and also some transfers that I cannot explain. The bank confirmed $23,000 on a same-day call. But Mom says there's more. I don't want to point fingers, but the reality is that the only other person with access to her account besides me has been Vivian. I think we need to talk about what's happening, and I think we need to do it as a family before involving anyone else. I read it 3 times. The first time I was looking for the threat. The second time I was listening for the narrative structure. The third time I was counting February, March, May, 800 to 2400 per transaction. 16 total transfers. Not a vague alarm. My brother had given them an itemized bill of particulars, complete with timeline, amounts, and the name of the accused. He had handed them a prosecution brief. What I noticed, what stayed with me, was that he did not say, "Vivian took $40,000. He said, "The only other person with access has been Vivian," which meant he was offering them the choice to draw their own conclusion. He was being reasonable. He was presenting facts. He was the one concerned, the one trying to help their mother, the one brave enough to name something difficult. He was the hero of his own story, and he had made sure that there were 6 witnesses to it. Vivian! That was the first response. Uncle Raymond, my mother's brother, a retired civil engineer who had taught me how to read a blueprint when I was 12 and had not spoken to me directly about anything important since. His message was 4 letters and a period. Then Consuelo. "I'm here with Grace now. We're both very upset." Then Portia. "I'm calling Mom." Then Emeka. "Something doesn't add up here." Then nothing. Not from Grace, not from me. The 3 of us who might have had something to say went silent. Grace because she did not know what to say. Me because I was making a choice about whether to say anything at all. I put my phone down and I ate my dinner. The ginger was sharp. The rice was perfect. I did not taste any of it. I was thinking about the specificity of Theo's message and what it meant that he had been specific in exactly that way. Naming months, citing amounts, creating a timeline that felt authoritative because it was detailed. The people who lie best are the ones who include just enough real information to make the invented part seem credible. They do not say something is missing. They say cash withdrawal starting in February, some in March, some in May, because the months are real, because the withdrawals happened, because the only false part is who made them. And they count on the fact that most people do not go back and verify the basic facts. They count on the narrative to carry them. At 9:47 p.m., Theo sent another message. "I know this is difficult. I also know that as a family, we should keep this between us while we figure it out. I don't want to drag lawyers or police into this if we don't have to. Mom raised us to handle things internally. Can we agree to keep this quiet until we understand what happened? Keep it quiet. Keep it between us. Handle it internally." Every single one of those phrases was a form of pressure. He was not asking them to believe him. He was asking them to protect him. He was asking the family to choose image over investigation. And he was doing it by wrapping his request in the language of family loyalty, family honor, family discretion. He was making it seem reasonable. He was making it seem loving. "I called my mother. She did not pick up. I called again at 10:15. She picked up on the second ring." "Mom." "Viv, hi." Her voice was very small. "I don't know what Tio told you, but I need you to know that I didn't do this." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. I could hear Consuelo in the background. Her voice low and steady. I know you didn't, my mother said. Do you? Because the family group chat suggests otherwise. I just need to understand what happened, she said. And that was all she said. Not, I believe you. Not, I'm sorry he did this. Just the request. Help me understand. I hung up. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not do anything that would have made sense in that moment. I just hung up and I opened my laptop and I began to move through my bank statements with the same precision that Theo had used to move through the family narrative. I did not respond in the group chat. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not when Portia messaged me directly asking what was going on. Not when my cousin Amika said he was looking into some things and would get back to everyone. I said nothing. I took a screenshot of Theo's first message, the exact wording, the timestamp, all of it. I took a screenshot of his second message. I took a screenshot of the conversation with Consuelo where she had told me that Theo said the rest of the money was moved somewhere she won't find it easily. I filed them all in a folder on my desktop labeled Chronology. I was building something. I did not yet know what it was going to be, but I knew that the people who win these arguments are the ones who gather facts before they start fighting. They are the ones who listen to someone's lie told in front of 6 witnesses and do not immediately correct them. They are the ones who understand that a response is not the same as a defense. On Thursday morning, Theo sent a third message. Vivian, I'm giving you the chance to explain this before I involve the police. I'm doing this because she's our mother, and I don't want to destroy our family. But if you took that money, you need to tell us where it is. He was giving me the chance to explain. He had already decided I was guilty. He was not asking. He was offering a path to confession, and he was making his generosity visible to everyone, to the entire family, so that when I refused to confess, when I insisted on my innocence, it would look like I was rejecting an olive branch. He was constructing the narrative in real time, and every message was another brick in the wall he was building between me and the people I loved. I did not respond to this either, but I did call my mother again, and this time she answered on the first ring. Mom, I need to ask you something. Did Theo say anything specific about when the money went missing? Did he give you dates? He said it started in February, some in March, some in May. Okay, and did he say how much? He said 23,000 that the bank could confirm, and more that they couldn't. Did he seem upset, like he had just discovered this? There was a long pause. I heard Consuelo say something in the background that I could not make out. He seemed... My mother paused, searching for the word. Rehearsed. She had noticed it too. The precision. The way he had practiced the lie until it sounded like the truth. It was the first moment that I understood my mother might not be completely lost to his narrative. That she might be smart enough and observant enough to see what was happening, even if she did not yet have the language to say it. I'm going to figure this out, I told her. I'm going to find the receipts, the statements, everything. And then we're going to have a conversation with Theo about what actually happened. When I hung up, I opened my laptop and I began the real work. Not the emotional work, not the defending myself work, but the forensic work. I pulled up my mother's bank statements again. I made a spreadsheet. I listed every transaction, every date, every amount. I cross-referenced it against my own calendar. I noted where I had been on each of those dates. I documented which days I had actually been present at my mother's house. I was building a timeline, but I was also building something else. I was building proof that I could not have made 17 separate withdrawals from an ATM that was 8 miles from my apartment while I was sitting at a desk 47 miles away, working a job that required me to be present and accounted for. I did not go to the office on Friday. I called in sick, which was true. In a way, my chest felt like something was pressing down on it, and I could not imagine sitting at my desk and pretending to care about quarterly travel variances, while my mother's account was empty and my brother was building a case against me in a family group chat. Instead, I stayed home, I printed statements, I organised them chronologically, I made notes in the margins. I was looking for something, anything, that would prove that Theo's narrative was constructed, that the specificity was the lie, that the months he named and the amounts he cited were not the accident of discovery, but the product of deliberate construction. I did not find it that day. The statements told me that the money was gone, that it was gone in exactly the pattern Theo had described. But they did not tell me why or how or who had taken it. They just told me that he was right about the facts, and that I was running out of time to prove that he was lying about the conclusions. By late Friday afternoon, I had received exactly 0 direct messages from Theo. He had not tried to convince me to confess. He had not offered me a path to redemption or forgiveness. He had simply made his accusation public, given me the chance to respond, and then left me to sit with the silence. That was when I understood. He was not trying to convince me. He was convinced that he had already won. He thought the family would choose image over investigation, that they would prefer to believe him rather than to actually know the truth, that the story he had told them was good enough. He did not know that I had 6 years of experience working as a financial analyst. He did not know that I understood how to read a bank statement the way other people read faces. He did not know that I had been taught, from the moment I was born, to notice when things did not add up. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel to give us more motivation to develop it. Thank you very much. Also, please comment where you're watching our videos. New York or Texas? We're very curious. Saturday morning. I pulled the filing box from the shelf in my mother's hallway closet. The one I had organised 2 years earlier during her hip recovery, when I had spent 6 weeks sorting 20 years of paper into colour-coded folders. Utility bills, property tax statements, medical records, warranties for appliances she no longer owned. I had done this work with her in the kitchen, and she had watched me order her life into something comprehensible, something manageable, something that made sense. Bank statements lived in the folder labelled finances in the back of the box. I spread them across my own bed. Months of them, printed pages showing deposits and withdrawals. The rhythm of a pension hitting her account on the first of each month, and then the slow draining of it across the weeks that followed. I was looking for what Theo had described. Suspicious transfers, cash withdrawals, patterns that did not match her normal spending. It took me 30 minutes of work before I found it. Starting in February of the previous year, there were ATM withdrawals from a branch on Westheimer Road, not the branch 2 miles from her house, not the one near her church, This one was 8 miles away, in a part of the city she did not frequent. 23 withdrawals over 14 months. $800, $1,200, $2,400. Cash coming out of her account in denominations large enough that she would not notice them individually, but regular enough that they would add up to something unsustainable. I pulled the household expense log, the one I maintained jointly with my mother. The spreadsheet where we logged everything that came out of her account so we could track whether her pension was actually covering her living costs, or whether she was slowly drawing down her savings. The ATM withdrawals on Westheimer did not appear anywhere in that log. Not once, not categorized as entertainment or gas or groceries, or the weekly cash she withdrew to tip her hairdresser. They were just gone, as if they had never been authorized by anyone who was supposed to be managing the account responsibly. I sat back. I looked at the dates again. February, March, May, the months Theo had recited to the family. The specificity of his accusation was exactly the specificity of the evidence in front of me. He had not guessed. He had not extrapolated. He had read these statements. He had seen these withdrawals. He had taken them and reframed them as evidence of my guilt, rather than his own. It was so clean, so complete, so utterly confident. I almost stopped there. I almost said, "Okay, the money is gone. It matches what he said. And now I have to figure out how to defend myself against evidence that is technically accurate, but completely misdirected." But then I remembered something. The app. The location-sharing app I had installed on my mother's phone 14 months ago. The one I had added Theo to out of an abundance of caution, out of a desire to be prepared, out of a belief that knowing where people were would somehow keep them safe. I opened my phone. I pulled up the family location app. I navigated to the activity history. I searched for Theo's name. The app showed every instance his phone had pinged a location. There were hundreds of pings over the past 14 months. His apartment, restaurants, office buildings, the routes he drove, and then filtering down. There was a cluster of 23 pings, all of them in the same location, all of them on specific dates. The ATM on Westheimer Road. I clicked on the first ping. The timestamp appeared, 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in February. I checked the bank statement. A withdrawal of $800 had been made at that ATM at 2:51 p.m. on that same Tuesday, 4 minutes apart. I went to the next ping, 11:23 a.m. on a Thursday in March. Withdrawal, $1,200 at 11:27 a.m. 4 minutes. And the next, 3:15 p.m. on a Saturday in April. Withdrawal, $2,400 at 3:19 p.m. 4 minutes. Every single one. 23 pings. 23 withdrawals. Everyone timestamped within 4 minutes of each other. Everyone at the same ATM. The app had been recording Theo's location every time he opened his phone, and his phone had been opening near that ATM. And every time it had opened, money had disappeared from my mother's account. And there was something else. 2 of those pings corresponded to texts that Theo had sent me. I scrolled through my message history with him. March 14th, 2:33 p.m. A message from him that said, "Hey, how's Mom doing? I'm in her neighborhood. Thought I'd check in." The timestamp on the location ping was 2:47 p.m. That same day, the ATM withdrawal was at 2:51 p.m. He had lied to me about being in her neighborhood. He had been at an ATM 8 miles away, and he had texted me from that location, pretending to be somewhere else. And then he had gone home and told my mother that I was the thief. I sat on my bedroom floor. My phones were in my hands, one in each palm, the screen showing the 2 pieces of evidence side by side. The location pings on one, the bank withdrawals on the other. The printed statements spread out around me in a semicircle. I did not move. I did not call anyone. I did not speak. I just sat there, looking at the data, understanding what it meant, watching the narrative I had been trying to defend against collapse into something much worse than a lie. It was a mirror. It was Theo showing me exactly what he had done and then asking me to look away. 11 minutes. That is how long I sat on that floor without moving. 11 minutes is a long time to sit completely still. In those 11 minutes, I was not thinking about how to defend myself anymore. I was thinking about the IOU in the kitchen drawer. I was thinking about the access he had been given so freely. I was thinking about my mother saying, "Theo always comes through," and understanding now that he had, in fact, always come through. He had come through every single time he needed money. And he had taken it, and he had done it methodically, deliberately, patterned across 14 months, 23 transactions, $40,000. The temperature in the room had not changed, but my body had. My chest felt compressed, like someone had pulled a belt around it and cinched it tighter with each withdrawal, each ping, each lie. My hands were steady. I was still holding both phones, and I was not shaking. But my knees had lost their certainty. If I had tried to stand at that moment, I would have fallen. This was the strange thing about discovering the truth. It did not feel like victory. It felt like understanding. Finally, how thoroughly I had been played. How every decision I had made to protect my mother had been a decision that enabled him. How the app I had installed to keep her safe had actually built the evidence of his crime. And I had handed him access to my mother's account like I was handing him a key to a room where all her trust was stored. And he had walked through that door and taken everything. When I finally moved, I did 2 things. First, I photographed every screen on both phones. The location pings, the timestamps, the withdrawal amounts. I took screenshots of the text messages where he had lied about his location. I took a picture of the printed bank statement with the Westheimer ATM withdrawals highlighted in yellow. I filed them all into a folder on my laptop labeled Verification. Second, I called Petra Holloway. She was a paralegal at a law firm downtown, someone I had met through a mutual friend. And I had her number in my phone because 2 years ago, I had asked her about tenant rights when my neighbor was being evicted. She picked up on the 3rd ring.
Vivian, is everything okay?
I need to ask you something, I said. If someone has a location sharing app on their phone and the app records their GPS coordinates at a specific location, and those coordinates match the timestamp of a financial transaction made from an account they have access to, is that admissible as evidence? There was a pause. Petra was careful about what she said, but she was also smart. She understood immediately that this was not a hypothetical question. That depends on a lot of things, she said. Whose phone? Whose account? What's the context? I told her. I told her about the app, the pings, the withdrawals, the 14 months. I told her what my brother had done and how he had done it, and that I could prove it because he had made the stupid mistake of opening his phone near an ATM while it was actively tracking his location. And I had installed that app out of love, out of worry, out of a desire to keep my mother safe. You need to talk to an actual attorney. Petra said, But yes, that's strong. That's very strong. Can you document everything?
I already am,
I said. When I hung up, I went back to the bedroom floor and I gathered up all the printed statements. I organized them chronologically. I made a second spreadsheet on my laptop. This one with 3 columns. The date, the ATM withdrawal amount, and the timestamp of Theo's location ping. Every single one matched. No exceptions, no outliers, no possibility of coincidence. My brother had walked into that ATM on Westheimer Road 23 times, and every time he had opened his phone, the app had recorded where he was. And every time the app had recorded where he was, he had withdrawn money from my mother's account. The narrative had not collapsed. It had inverted. I was not the guilty party trying to prove my innocence. He was the guilty party who had built his case against me out of the exact same data that now proved his crime. He had given me the roadmap. He had handed me the evidence. He had told the family which months and which amounts to look for. And in doing so, he had told me exactly where to find him. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel to give us more motivation to develop it. Thank you very much. Also, please comment where you're watching our videos. New York or Texas? We're very curious. The linked savings account was harder to trace. My mother had opened it 5 years earlier, a place to park her property tax funds and her home insurance payments. Money she wanted separate from her daily spending. Theo had not needed to ask for access to this account. It was already connected to the checking account he could access, and bank systems being what they are. Authorization tends to cascade. If you can move money out of the main account, you can move it to the subsidiary accounts. You can move it anywhere the system will let you move it. I found the first transfer on a Tuesday in April of the previous year. $2,500. Moved from the checking account into the savings account with a memo that said, household. Then a week later, $3,200 with a memo that said, repair fund. Then $4,000, then $3,000, smaller amounts that looked, on their surface, like reasonable categorizations of household expenses. My mother had a roof that needed maintenance. She had plumbing that occasionally failed. She had appliances that could break. The transfers looked like prudent financial planning. The problem was that the money never came back out. It sat in the savings account, accumulating. I pulled the full transaction history for the savings account for the entire 14-month period. 12 transfers, $17,000 total. All of it moved from the checking account where my mother's pension landed to the savings account where it disappeared. And all of it labeled with language designed to make it seem like my mother had authorized it, like she had decided it was necessary, like she had planned it. I added the numbers. The ATM withdrawals from Westheimer Road, $23,000. The transfers to the savings account, $17,000. $40,000. The number sat on my screen for a long time. Not in the abstract. I could see it, laid out in my spreadsheet, documented in transaction records, proven by location pings and time-stamped withdrawals and memo field lies. $40,000 taken from a woman whose annual income was $52,400. More than 76% of her annual pension. Gone in 14 months. That evening, I called my mother. She answered before the phone had fully rung. Honey.
Viv?
Mom, I found it. All of it. The $40,000. It's documented. The ATM withdrawals. The transfers to the savings account. Everything. I have proof. There was a long silence. I could hear Consuelo in the background. The sound of her moving. The clink of dishes being put away.
Okay,
My mother said finally.
okay. When can you come over?
Tomorrow. I'll drive up in the morning. But before I hung up, she said something else. Vivian, I believe you. I need you to understand what it would mean for this family if your brother did this. I held the phone against my ear, and I did not say anything for a moment because I was calculating in real time what she was asking me to understand. She was not asking me to understand the evidence. She was not asking me to comprehend the documentation or the proof or the 14-month trail of theft. She was asking me to understand the cost of admitting it. She was asking me to weigh the truth against the family's image, against Theo's reputation, against the story they had told themselves about who he was. She was asking me to understand why silence might be preferable to justice. She was asking me, in other words, to understand on behalf of the family, to absorb the cost, to make it smaller by not naming it, to protect them all by protecting him.
I understood exactly what she meant.
I also understood something else in that moment. I had been understanding things on behalf of this family my entire life. I had understood when my father said he needed space, and my mother needed me to understand that it was not betrayal. It was just the way some marriages worked. I had understood when Theo promised to pay back the $3,000 and then did not. And my mother needed me to understand that he was trying, that he was a good son, that sometimes good sons had setbacks. I had understood when the utility bills came and I helped my mother pay them without asking Theo to contribute his fair share, because I understood that he was struggling. I had understood every choice that made my family more comfortable at the expense of my own certainty. Every single time I had understood, I had hoped that the understanding would be reciprocated, that if I made room for their failures, they would make room for my needs, that if I accepted their compromises, they would accept my truth. That understanding had never protected me once.
Mom, I'm going to do what I should have done at the beginning,
I said.
I'm going to tell the truth.
Vivian! I hung up before she could ask me to understand something else. I opened my laptop. I created a new document. I titled it Documentation, and I began to work. Not the spreadsheets. I had those already. Not the screenshots of the location pings. Those were organized in folders. I began to compile it all into a single file. The PDF would be 14 pages. Page 1, a title page with the dates and the total amount. Pages 2 through 4, the bank withdrawal slips from Westheimer Road, arranged chronologically, each one showing the date, the time, the amount. Pages 5 through 7, the transfers to the linked savings account, with the memo field text visible, with the dates and amounts documented. Pages 8 and 9. The location history from the app, screenshots showing Theo's phone position at the ATM, time-stamped, geotagged, undeniable. Page 10. The text messages where Theo had lied about his location. Pages 11 through 13. The household expense log that Grace and I had maintained, showing which expenses were accounted for and which ones were not, showing the discrepancy between what had left the account and what had been documented as household spending. And page 14, the photograph of the $3,000 IOU signed by Theo in my mother's kitchen, sitting in her drawer with the utility bills. A promise he had made and never kept. 14 pages. 1 PDF. 14 months of theft. Compiled into a document that would take someone 6 minutes to read. I did not add narrative. I did not add accusations. I did not add emotion or explanation or context. I let the document speak. I let the timestamp speak. I let the memo field lies speak. I let the location pings that matched the withdrawals speak. The evidence did not need me to interpret it. The evidence was clear. The evidence was specific. The evidence was undeniable. It took me 3 hours to build the PDF. I fact-checked every page. I verified every number. I made sure the dates matched, and the amounts were accurate, and the timestamps were verbatim from the source documents. I did not want there to be any question about the authenticity of what I was compiling. I did not want anyone in the family to be able to say that I had misrepresented the data or exaggerated the amounts or taken things out of context. The PDF had to be so clean, so organized, so obviously true that the only response would be to accept it. When I was done, I did not send it. I did not email it to my mother or Theo or Uncle Raymond or anyone else. I saved it to my desktop with the file name 40,000.pdf, and I closed the laptop and I sat in the darkness of my apartment, and I understood that I had just built the thing that would blow apart the family's careful narrative. I had just created the bomb. I just did not know yet when I would set the timer. What I did know was this: I was no longer going to understand things on behalf of my family. I was no longer going to make room for their failures in the hope that they would eventually make room for mine. I was no longer going to absorb the cost of their choices and call it loyalty. I had spent 34 years being the reliable one, the careful one, the one who noticed things and managed them quietly so that everyone else could feel stable. And that reliability had been used against me. My attention to detail had been used to build a case against me. My willingness to understand had been weaponized into an accusation. Generosity without boundaries is not generosity. It is permission. And I had given my family permission to use me for a very long time. Not anymore. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel to give us more motivation to develop it. Thank you very much. Also, please comment where you're watching our videos. New York or Texas? We're very curious. I did not call my mother that morning. I did not text Theo some version of a warning. I did not draft and redraft an explanation in the group chat to soften what I was about to send. I simply opened the PDF on my laptop. 14 pages. Every one of them clean and organized and undeniable. And I opened the family group chat. 6 people. Grace, Theo, Uncle Raymond, Consuelo Reyes, my cousin Portia, and my cousin Emeka, the 6 people my mother had decided, 5 years ago, should be the audience for everything that mattered in this family. I did not write, "As you can see, my brother stole $40,000. I did not write, "I have compiled evidence that proves Theo systematically withdrew money from our mother's account over 14 months. I did not provide a roadmap or a summary or any kind of interpretation that might allow someone to dismiss what they were about to see. I simply attached the file and I typed, "I thought everyone should have the same information at the same time." That was all. I pressed send at 9:14 on a Thursday. For approximately 30 seconds, nothing happened. The message appeared in the chat with a grey clock icon next to it. The universal sign that the message was still uploading, still processing, still in transit. I watched the cursor spin. I watched the file transfer. I did not move. I did not look away. And then the clock disappeared and the check mark appeared, which meant the message had been sent to the server. The PDF was now available to all 6 people in that chat. The first red receipt appeared 7 seconds later. It was Grace. Then Consuelo, 15 seconds later. Then Portia and Emeka within seconds of each other. They were opening the chat and seeing what I had sent. Theo's red receipt did not appear. Uncle Raymond's red receipt did not appear. 3 minutes passed. No one responded in the chat. No one sent a message. No one asked a question or demanded an explanation or told me I'd gone too far. The silence was complete, but in that silence, I knew what was happening. I knew that my mother was opening the first page of the PDF and seeing the title page with the dates and the dollar amount. I knew that Consuelo was reading the dates and understanding what they meant. I knew that Portia and Emeka were scrolling through the bank withdrawal slips and trying to make sense of what they were seeing. And I knew that Theo had received the notification, but had not opened it yet. Because opening it meant facing what he had done. He was probably staring at his phone in whatever room he was in, watching the chat indicator, understanding that something had fundamentally shifted, that the narrative he had spent months building had just been demolished by 14 pages of evidence that did not lie and could not be reframed and could not be apologized away by saying, "We're family." At the 3-minute mark, the first response came through. It was from Uncle Raymond. Not a question, not an explanation, not a call for calm or understanding or family unity. Just 4 words, sent in a single message. "Call me." The tone was not negotiable. The tone was not an invitation. It was a summons. It was a man who had spent 62 years understanding what loyalty meant and what it did not mean, looking at 14 pages of evidence and understanding that the family's choice had already been made, not by me, by Theo, by every withdrawal he made, every memo field he labeled, every time he opened his phone near an ATM and lied about where he was. I did not call him. Not immediately. I waited. I sat with the phone in my hand and I read the messages as they continued to arrive. Portia asking if this was real. Emeka asking if I was sure about the information. Grace not saying anything at all. Theo, finally, sending a message that said only, "This isn't what it looks like." Which was, I understood, the beginning of his defense. Not a denial, not an explanation, just the opening line of a negotiation, What you're seeing is not the whole picture. There are circumstances you don't understand. I can explain this if you let me. It was the voice of someone who believed that leverage was still possible, that the family would choose complexity over clarity, that if he offered them enough excuses, they would take them. He did not understand that the moment he had walked into that ATM on Westheimer Road with my mother's bank card in his hand, the leverage was gone. He did not understand that every photograph, every timestamp, every carefully labelled memo field in a transfer was another brick in a wall that could not be negotiated. He did not understand that some actions do not permit explanation. They only permit consequence. Uncle Raymond sent another message. "Vivian, call me now!" I picked up the phone. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel to give us more motivation to develop it. Thank you very much. Also, please comment where you're watching our videos. New York or Texas? We're very curious. The fallout arrived in pieces. Grace did not call that night, or the next morning, or even the afternoon after I sent the PDF. She called on Saturday, 2 days later, and when I picked up, the first thing I heard was the weight of the silence before she spoke. We talked for 37 minutes. Not about what she had seen in the PDF. We did not dissect the withdrawals or examine the timestamps or relitigate the evidence. We talked about what it meant, what it would mean for her to acknowledge what her son had done, what it would mean for me to have been right about him, what it would mean for both of us to stop pretending that we could protect each other by pretending the other thing had not happened. There was no apology. Not from her, not from me, just an understanding that some things, once said out loud and documented in a 14-page PDF sent to 6 people, cannot be walked back by either party. They can only be acknowledged, carried, eventually, perhaps forgiven, but not yet. Not the kind of forgiveness that requires everyone to pretend nothing happened. Theo did not respond in the family group chat. Not that day. Not the next. Instead, he called Uncle Raymond. Uncle Raymond, being Uncle Raymond, called me back the next morning. "Did you have to do it that way?" he asked, which was not a question about whether I was right. It was a question about whether I had to be so public about it, whether I could have handled it more quietly, more delicately, more carefully designed to protect the family's ability to deny what had happened if they wanted to. "Yes," I told him. "I did." He did not argue. He knew why. He had lived long enough to understand that sometimes the only way to force the truth into the light is to stop dimming it. That sometimes you have to send the PDF to 6 people at once, because if you give anyone the chance to manage the narrative, to smooth it, to soften it, to make it more palatable, then you have given them permission to lie. Petra Holloway connected me with an attorney at her firm, a woman named something I have forgotten now, who drafted a formal demand letter to Theo. $3,000 from the IOU? $17,000 from the savings account transfers? $23,000 from the ATM withdrawals? $40,000 total, payable within 30 days. Or she would file a civil claim on my mother's behalf. Theo paid $18,000 in 2 installments. The first check arriving 8 days after the demand letter. The second arriving 16 days after that. Then he stopped responding to emails. He did not pay the remainder. He did not offer a plan or a timeline or any explanation. he simply disappeared from the conversation. Grace's attorney filed a civil claim on the 31st day, and it became a legal matter rather than a family matter. That was the moment I understood. Theo had decided that the cost of continuing to pretend was lower than the cost of admitting what he had done. He had chosen the lawsuit over the apology. 3 months passed. Life continued. I went back to work. I attended budget meetings. I reconciled variances. I did all the things that financial analysts do when they are not building cases against their brothers. And then one Sunday, I drove the 47 miles to my mother's house. She was making tea when I arrived. Not the efficient, purposeful kind of tea making. The kind where you boil water and pour it over a bag and move on. The slow kind. The kind where you measure loose tea into an infuser and watch the leaves unfurl in hot water and let the whole process take time. She had a small kitchen table, the one with the pattern of blue flowers around the edge that I had always hated when I was a child, because it seemed too delicate, too intentional, like someone was trying to make something ordinary into something precious by painting flowers on it. I had stopped hating it sometime in the last few months. We sat at that table. We did not talk about the PDF. We did not talk about Theo. We did not explain anything to each other. Not why she had waited 3 months to invite me. Not why I had waited 3 months to come. Not why we were both willing now to sit together in a kitchen that held the memory of an IOU being signed and then filed away with the utility bills. We just sat. She poured the tea. The steam rose. The flowers on the cup blurred slightly with the heat. And I made a decision in that moment, sitting at the kitchen table in a house that belonged to my mother, in a room where my brother had stolen and my mother had forgiven him before it was revealed, and then had to reckon with what it meant to stop forgiving. Presence, for now, was enough. I used to think clearing my name would feel like winning. It felt like exactly what it was. Cleaning up a mess someone else made in a house I still love. Using skills I spent years building for exactly this kind of problem. The difference is, so I stopped pretending I shouldn't need them. I stopped acting like it was weakness to notice things, to pay attention, to track the numbers and understand what they meant. I stopped apologizing for being the kind of daughter who organized her mother's finances and installed apps to keep her safe, and then had to use those same tools to prove a theft. I stopped waiting for the family to understand that being careful and being competent are not the same thing as being cold. They can both be forms of love. And sometimes the truest thing you can do is tell people exactly what the numbers say, in front of everyone, without softening it or explaining it away or asking for permission to be believed. The civil lawsuit against Theo is still pending. I do not know if my mother will ever see the remaining money. I do not know if my relationship with my brother will ever be anything other than what it is now. A thing that was broken by his choices and by my decision to make those choices visible, and by her decision to love him anyway, and by my decision to stop needing her to love me more than she loves him. Some families survive betrayal by choosing to forget. We survived it by choosing to remember. It does not feel like winning, most days. But it feels like truth. And truth, as it turns out, is the only thing that actually holds. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel to give us more motivation to develop it. Thank you very much! Also, please comment where you're watching our videos. New York or Texas? We're very curious.